we've got a lot to talk about. And in fact, you created a really fantastic timeline highlighting key moments for women in music. And I'm going to share that with our listeners in the show notes because they're going to think that's just so cool. But where should we start this discussion? Like, when did women start using music as a form of social resistance or change? Maybe that's not the right word, but who were some of these early artists, or what were some of the early songs that really gave voice to women's issues, for lack of a better term?
Well, I was thinking about this. It's actually a hard question to answer to some degree, partly because female artists have not been as talked about and written about as male artists. But I decided to place it in the 20s and 30s, at least in the modern music industry, with the female blues singers that were
Mm,
recorded on so-called race records back in the days when the industry was segregated purposely by the major labels into Tin Pan Alley pop, that is, all pop,
right.
race, African American music, and hillbilly, that is white country music. And some of the people recorded, like people like Bessie Smith and Ma Rainey, Mamie Smith, Sippy Thomas, Victoria Spivey, Ida Cox, Memphis Minnie, you can still find on recordings or on Spotify, anywhere.
Hmm.
Just the things they were singing about. They were singing about Black women's lives. They were singing about sexuality quite bodily. They were singing about things that, I like to think that what they were doing was a form of protest, of like, in a
Yeah,
way that maybe not purposely, but in a way for Black women to speak their truth at that
right.
point in time was kind of, not something that really happened. And it's interesting because these blues singers were, they were kind of the foundation of rock and roll. I mean, Led Zeppelin stole Memphis
Right.
mini song "When the Levee Breaks," and it's known for them. But no, she originally did that. She was a guitar player.
Wow.
She's singing about her environments. So I would really have to say that we might want to start there and just really give a good listen to what they're singing about, and we will learn a lot about Black women's lives in the era, for
So
better or worse.
it is so fascinating that it starts not just gendered, but also racialized, that it's Black
Yes,
women coming to the music space and telling their story and using strong songs as a form of empowerment. That is,
they
I think, so incredibly powerful, and probably something, as you said, people don't know enough about this because there's not as much written, but that is incredible. Let's jump.
Mhm.
He started in the
Well,
20s and 30s.
I actually was going to take a pause in the 1940s and just
Oh,
talk
okay.
about
Go for it.
not so much protesting, but there was Sister Rosetta Tharpe, who
Mm,
was a Church of Gospel in Christ preacher. She was also an incredible guitarist, and she is arguably the first big deal electric guitarist. And one of her songs in the 40s might,
wow.
some have said that, like the uh, popular music historian and brilliant Gail Wald has said that it's probably the first guitar solo. And yet
Wow.
until Dr. Wald published Shout Sister Shout about 10 to 15 years ago, she was unheard of. And now
Mm,
she has been elevated up where she belongs. So just the idea of a Black woman playing a Gibson SG, which is the ultimate heavy metal guitar, it's the one that looks like devil horns.
yeah.
It's quite a thing. And yet she was, you know, no one really knew who she was. She was disappeared for years. In fact, Wald actually put a headstone on her grave, from what I understand. So
It's incredible that you made the poignant point that we don't know because there's just not as much written about these women
right,
musicians. Like, there's so
right,
much more discourse and dialogue in pop culture around men, but women were always present in the space,
right,
laying foundations for other women and
absolutely.
for it to grow. Thanks for that stop in the 40s. That's really fascinating. Now, I know
And now
you go ahead.
and I was going to say, the next stop is, and I need to put this on your list, by the way, you can take that out, was the second folk revival of the late 50s. I mean, one of the first big stars of it, female stars, was Joan Baez. She
Yeah.
was bigger than Dylan at that time. Now, of course, she is not a songwriter per se, but, she sang these songs. She was also very outspoken politically. And that's probably what she's often remembered for, and she's still outspoken
Right.
politically.
Yeah.
She's out there, she has a new film biography of her. out there, and she got kind of subsumed, I think, when rock takes over. Unfortunately, partly through her ex-partner Bob Dylan, who she's still tied with, even though they
Mm.
haven't been a couple for 60 years. Um, so you had Joan Baez, you had others in the second folk revival who either singer-songwriters or people who facilitated a lot of the things, like one of the
Right.
editors of Broadside magazine. And then though, when I say, I'm not sure that this particular singer started out in order to protest how things were, and I'm sure I'm missing things too, by the way. I mean, there are a lot of
There's a
African
lot to
American
talk
women
about. Yeah.
singers in the 50s and 60s too that we really need to listen to what they were saying, and just that they were doing
Hmm.
was kind of remarkable. But then I think about Joni Mitchell,
Of course.
who comes out, here from Canada, of
Right.
course, and she started singing about her life, her
Mhm.
emotions, the real feeling of being, uh, what it was like to feel like a woman in some ways,
Right.
and a young woman to go through things. And she continues to have now it's seen, now that she almost died and has come back, and I saw her at the Hollywood Bowl. That was amazing. With my daughter, who discovered her as 18, is not 18 anymore, but discovered her at the same age. It was Mitchell who really, in my opinion, uh, brought out, sorry, I have some notes I'm looking at, um, had some, she really started to sing about what it was like to be a
Hmm.
woman,
Like the
and
female experience, which
the
is
female
right.
experience, and, really differentiating it from the male experience in a big way. And, was
Hmm.
given the name, confessional singer-songwriter, which she later kind of disdained. And then when after the '70s, her music became more political and
Right.
observational, and a lot of people didn't like that, but listening to it again is, that's a voice we really need to hear and a perspective that we don't often have. I mean, she sang a song
Mhm.
about a friend who was, called Cherokee Louise is the name of the song, who was suffering sexual abuse from her stepfather.
Yeah.
And, she actually played that at the Hollywood Bowl concert. It's so very obviously, it's something that she wanted to get out there. Um, for her to be singing about those sort of things in the '80s,
Hmm.
that was not happening. So,
Right.
I think she's not the only one. Carole King is known for her songwriting, known for Tapestry, but, songs like she didn't write the lyrics though to "We Used to Love Me Tomorrow" about, this typical teenage sex song, Her
Right.
husband at the time, Jerry Goffin, actually wrote those lyrics, but, you know, uh, you start to think, she's also singing about female experience or
Hmm.
especially, as her later albums. Um, there are so I think if we dig into a lot of the singer-songwriters of that era who often were not, treated well by the industry, by rock criticism, things
No.
like that, we'll see that they're really making statements. I mean